This is the new iPad Air 4. It has a new Pro-like design, new display, and a new power button. If you're upgrading from an older iPad, you're probably coming from something that looks a little bit more like this. So, what are the differences between an iPad that looks like this and the new iPad Air 4? Let's see. Hey, my name is Jerry, and I was very excited to open up this box and see the new iPad Air 4. Just as expected, the color is what I would call a mint green that is subdued but not pale, as it looks like the blue Air 4 is. Inside the box, you also get a 20-watt power adapter, which is more than you get with the iPhone 12, and a USB-C to USB-C cable. Going through the iPad setup is very similar to previous iPads, and the one thing I was curious about was setting up the Touch ID. Since the iPad Air 4 does not have a home button, Apple moved Touch ID to the power or sleep-wake button instead, and the process is pretty much the same. First, you repeatedly lift your finger and touch the button as the red lines fill in. After that, it will ask you to adjust your finger to get more of the edges. And that's how you set up Touch ID on the iPad Air 4, very similar to previous generation iPads. So here's the new iPad Air 4. I think that it looks really nice, and I think it feels really nice too. You can see instantly the design cues it takes from the iPad Pro. This iPad is running iOS 14 along with the 6th gen iPad, so let's see how they compare. We already talked about how Touch ID is on the power button of the iPad Air 4 compared to the home button on previous iPads, because there's no home button on the new iPad Air 4. So how do you wake them up and unlock them? With older iPads, you can just press your finger down on the home button and keep it there for a second, and it will unlock and get to the home screen. With the iPad Air 4, should be the same thing. You press down once, leave your finger there, and it gets right to the home screen. Now, if this is your first Apple device without a home button, there's going to be a few changes with how you move around the interface, so let me talk about that just real quick. When you're inside an app and you need to get back to the home screen, on the older iPads, you of course hit the home button and you go back to the home screen. With newer iPads and newer iPhones, you have down here this home bar that acts in a similar way, except you can't just press it because it's not going to do anything. But what you can do is swipe up. And that takes you right back to the home screen, but there's a couple of other things you can do as well. On older iPads, to get to your previous applications window, you double tap the home button and you can see all your previously opened apps, and you can click on one to get back to it. With the iPad Air 4 or any Apple device without a home button, you just swipe up and hold, and now you can see your previously opened apps, and again, you just tap to get back to the app. One of the benefits of going with an all-screen device now and no home button is you can actually do a quick swipe to get back and forth between apps. So let's say I'm inside the Notes app and I need to go back to the previous application to get more information. I can just swipe to the right on that home bar, and now I'm back to the previous app. And I can see, oh, iPhone 12. Well, now I need to put iPhone 12 on the note. I can just swipe that way, iPhone 12. There we go. And of course, you can go to other previous apps and you can go forward in the timeline as well. And that's just the basics of moving around an all-screen iPad versus an iPad with a home button. Now, I have mentioned that this is a new display and an all-screen iPad, and what you will notice most is that this is a bigger display with smaller bezels, and it looks nicer, more modern, but you actually get more than you realize at first. The display is a 10.9-inch screen versus the more common 9.7-inch iPads, and the display is laminated to the glass. What that means is there's no separation or gap between the display and the glass, which brings the pixels closer and feels like you're actually interacting with the pixels themselves. There's also more colors with the wide P3 color gamut, which will come in handy when looking at photos from modern iPhones, which can capture that wider color range. You also get True Tone on this iPad, which changes the white balance of the screen depending on the ambient lighting, making the colors on the screen act more like physical objects or a photo. As far as brightness goes, depending on how old your iPad is, you may see a 25% increase in brightness. The 6th gen iPad matches the iPad Air 4 at 500 nits of brightness, and actually, let me just turn these up and see if we can see a difference. And just looking at these with my eye, they look to be essentially the same brightness. So these are pretty much the same brightness, but if you have anything older than a 5th gen iPad, you'll get a brighter display by upgrading to this Air 4, which can help with using it outside or in a very bright room. As far as cameras go, the iPad Air 4 gets much better cameras than previous non-Pro iPads. The iPad Air 3 and the last few generations of the standard iPad have an 8 megapixel rear camera with an f2.4 aperture that can shoot HD video. The Air 4 gets either a very similar or the same camera as what's in the iPad Pro, which is 12 megapixels, f1.8, and can do 4K video at 60 frames per second. So if you're one of the 3 people or so that use their iPads for photos or video, then this will be a big upgrade. And I'm not knocking you if you do. I use my iPad Pro to help shoot a number of my YouTube videos. The front-facing camera also gets a nice boost with the Air 4. There's a 7 megapixel 1080p camera compared to the 1.2 megapixel 720p camera on previous iPads. Both of these iPads have dual speakers. The older iPad has 2 speakers at the bottom, and the Air has 1 on each side, like when you're holding in landscape. The nice thing about the iPad Air is that just like with iPads Pro, the speaker will automatically orient themselves in landscape. So no matter if you're holding the iPad with the power button on the left or on the right, the speakers will automatically adjust to keep the stereo channel on the correct side. So the left is the left, the right is the right, no matter which way I hold it. Let's do a little audio test and see how they sound. Okay, to my ears, it's pretty clear that the Air 4 has much better speakers and the stereo separation really creates a much better listening experience. I want to say one thing real quick about the weight. Even though the iPad Air 4 is clearly a larger device than this iPad, it is lighter. The Air 4 with cellular comes in at 1.01 pounds, whereas this 6th gen iPad with cellular comes in at 1.05 pounds. So if you are at all concerned about the weight of upgrading to a larger iPad, you shouldn't need to worry. If you're using a previous generation iPad that supports the original Apple Pencil, like this 6th generation or 7th or 8th generation iPad, or the iPad Air 3, or even the first generations of iPad Pro, this pencil will not work with this new iPad Air 4. If you want to use an Apple Pencil, you'll need to use the 2nd generation Apple Pencil, which connects magnetically to the side of the iPad to charge and pair. Another change that you may notice is that there's a USB-C port on the bottom instead of Lightning. This is a big upgrade because not only can you get faster charging through USB-C, you can also connect a slew of USB accessories like an SD card reader or USB drives, AV connectors to connect this to an external display, USB hubs, and other things. This helps expand the possibility of what iPad can do. As far as battery life, you can get the same 10 hours of battery while surfing or watching video as every other iPad since the original in 2010. So you should see the same battery life or better than what you have with your older iPad depending on the battery health and how old it is. I do wish that Apple would expand the battery life over time, add extra capacity, but at the expense of extra battery life, we do get to keep getting faster processors. Apple put its newest chip in the iPad Air 4, the A14, and it's fast. It's got more cores, more megahertz, more GPU, more neural engine than your old iPad. Most people will not care about this, but here's the Geekbench results between my 6th gen iPad from early 2018 with an A10 versus the A14 in the iPad Air 4. And what this translates to for the average user is faster app launches, faster app installs, faster web page loading, fewer random stutters when switching apps, and some games will get better details in the graphics. There, of course, will be niche use cases like video editing that will work far better on the Air versus this old guy. So, if you're upgrading from an iPad that looks like this to an iPad Air 4, there's going to be some differences. You get a more modern design, better screen, much better cameras, USB support on the bottom for accessories, and performance that will last for years. If you're upgrading from an iPad with a home button for the first time, you may have to retrain your muscles to unlock the iPad from the new power button on top versus using a home button. And of course, learn some new gestures to just move around the system. I think the iPad 4 is an awesome iPad. It takes what's great about the iPad, like good performance and features at a reasonable price, and mixes it with the premium design language and cues from the iPad's Pro line. The addition of USB-C on the bottom and the smart connector on the back opens up a whole new world of possibilities for new accessories to make the iPad more of a computer replacement. If you're interested to see how an iPad can be your only computer, you should check out this video right over here. Hit the thumbs up button if you liked it, hit subscribe if you want, and I'll see you next time.